Members, we have a quorum, so I call this meeting to order. Let me first welcome members to the meeting of the panel on transport. This is a meeting conducted via Zoom, and let me remind members that when you speak, please switch on the video camera function of Zoom to show your faces, whereas the microphone will only be switched on upon my instruction. During the meeting, if you wish to submit the paper, please email the paper to the email account of this panel. And during the remote meeting, please use the virtual background function of Zoom to show the appropriate background colors. That's orange for EC members, green for FC members, and purple for GC members. You will find the relevant colors in the restricted email circulated to members on the 7th of April 2022. And during the meeting, if a quorum count is called, you may wish to refer to the procedure set out in Appendix 1. First item of the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. Would members please note that since the last meeting on the 15th of February, the panel has altogether received 6 information papers. Details are set out in agenda item 1. In relation to Mr. Yim Kong's letter dated the 5th of April 2022, in relation to a proposal to expedite the transport infrastructure development in the North District, may I ask members whether you'd like to include this proposal in the list of items for discussion? If so, please indicate by raising your hands. All right. If you agree with Mr. Yim Kong's suggestion, please raise your hand. I see that most members agree with this proposal. I will ask the Secretariat to follow up on the matter. Second item, date of next meeting and items for discussion. Members, please note that the next regular meeting will be held on the 22nd of April 2022 at Friday, 10:45 a.m. The administration's proposed to discuss the following items. 1. MTR fare adjustment for 2022. And 2. 6852 TH widening of Phúc Hang Chun Road between Castle Peak Road, Lam Tay, and Phúc Hang Chun Lane. Item 3. Progress update on Smart Traffic Fund and Smart Mobility initiatives. All right, members. Any view on the proposed items? Dr. Loy Kwok. Dr. Loy Kwok, please switch on his mic. I actually raised my hand first. Sorry, I missed your hand. Mr. Tony Chair. Chairman, I don't have any comments on the 3 proposed items, but then I do see these 3 items are rather hot topics, so members may wish to have a longer time for discussion. Please bear this in mind, Chairman. Next, Dr. Loy Kwok. Please switch on Dr. Loy Kwok's mic. His line isn't coming through. I can't hear you, Dr. Low. Is the mic on? Whilst we are fixing Dr. Loy Kwok's mic, I want to ask members the following. Like Mr. Tony Chair just now said, we're going to discuss 3 items, and I suppose members will have a lot to say about the MTR fare adjustment. So, members, do we agree to extend the meeting by 35 minutes Perhaps we should advance the next meeting to start at 10:15, just like today. Any objection, Mr. Yuen Kit and the other member seconds? All right, if there is no objection, we will do that because the next meeting is to be held on the 22nd. It is possible that the 5th we will have this meeting in person. The Secretariat will try to book conference room 1 and you'll be informed in due course. Dr. Loy Kwok, do you want to speak? Your mic isn't on. Right, then sorry to say that we need to move on. We now move on to item 3, enhanced personalized and point-to-point transport services. There are 3 papers. First, CB-424/2022/02, that's paper provided by the administration. And then CB-424/2022/03, that is an updated background brief prepared by the Electrical Secretariat. The third paper is a submission for members' reference from the Hong Kong Taxi Trade Association. Now, to ensure smooth conduct of the meeting, I will first invite the staff to remove all the raised hand indications. Please remove them first. All right, if you want to speak, you may press the button now. And let me remind members that in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedures, if there is any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to the items being discussed, please disclose the nature of the interest before you speak. Meanwhile, let me welcome the administration to our meeting. We have Mr. Frank Chan, Secretary for Transport and Housing, and also, oh, sorry, I can't read that list now. Commissioner Law, right, Ms. Rosanna Law, Commissioner for Transport, to our meeting. Secretary, would you like to make a start, or the Commissioner? I'll say a few words and then I will defer to my Deputy Secretary to deliver a presentation. All right, you have the floor. Thank you, Chairman. Personalized and point-to-point transport services is a major element of our transportation system in Hong Kong. At the moment, taxis constitute the majority of these services, while hire cars provide services for special market niches such as hotel and tour service, which do not come under the category of public transport service. In recent years, the public has been concerned about the overall taxi services. Together with increase in operational costs, the taxi trade is facing a lot of difficulties. In light of the situation, the government has reviewed the overall taxi operation and management and proposed to take forward a series of measures to improve the development of the taxi industry and reform the industry with a view to enhancing the quality of the services. For example, we'll be dealing with fare increase applications. There will also be an introduction of the taxi fleet management regime and increasing the maximum passenger seating capacity, introducing a taxi driving offense point system and a 2-tier penalty system when we will increase the penalties for illegal carriage of passengers for hire or reward by vehicles. The last taxi fare increase was in April 2017. The present level of fares could no longer be financially viable for the taxi trade, and it is not conducive to attracting new blood. So we'll take into account the factors, the public opinion, as well as the views of the TAC. At the same time, we propose to increase the maximum passenger seating capacity to enhance the quality of service and offer more choices for consumers. In future, we plan to give an overhaul to the regime by introducing a taxi fleet management regime. The fleet may apply for a taxi operator fleet license so that with professional fleet management and under the supervision of the government, safe and quality taxi services can be provided. At the same time, we also propose to introduce a taxi driving offense point system, TDOP, and a two-tier penalty system, as well as increasing the penalties for illegal carriage of passengers for hire or reward by motor vehicles to give better protection to passengers. Chairman will be happy to take questions and comments from members. I will now invite Deputy Secretary to give a presentation on this proposal. All right, thank you. Deputy Secretary. Thank you. I will go through the proposals by way of a PowerPoint presentation. First, on taxi fare increase applications, the last application was made in April 2017, and in September 2018, the trade applied for increase of taxi fare increase, and in 2019, the government consulted the electrical panel and the Transport Advisory Committee, TAC, yet because of COVID-19, the government suspended the scrutiny of this application. However, we consider that the overall business environment of the trade has been deteriorating, and we considered it opportune to revisit this application. And there are 5 criteria in considering the application. First, financial viability of taxi operation will take into account the changes in revenue and operating costs. And second, the need to maintain an acceptable level of taxi service. And third, the need to maintain a reasonable differential between taxi fares and those of other public transport modes. Now, for urban taxis, there should be a 5- to 7-fold fare differential with other public transport modes. The 4th point, public acceptability of the proposed fares. And the 5th point, the taxi fare structure should be front-loaded. And in terms of the current taxi fare increase applications, we considered the data collected in 2021 and pre-COVID situation. And as you can see, fuel costs have increased by 20% or so, whereas the flag 4 charges decreased, and also the taxi rental. So for rentee drivers, owner drivers, and rental owners, they all see a drop in their income. And we also compared their net income with the operators of other public transport. We find that the average monthly net income of rentee drivers in 2021 is around $18,000 to $19,000. However, the average monthly salary of the transport trade was $22,000. And indeed, it is no surprise why the taxi trade is unable to attract new blood. Having considered the new criteria and the data concerned, we believe that it is opportune to consider the taxi fare increase application. Having considered the criteria and having heard views from members today, we will be submitting a proposal to the Senior Council for consideration before we float the bill in the Council. The second proposal is to introduce a taxi fleet management regime. It is a rather major change with a view to enhancing the quality of services. We would encourage the trade to form a fleet, and then they can apply to the Transport Department for a taxi operator fleet license. We will also encourage the trade to make better use of technology to enhance the taxi service. And we'd like to stress that the regime has nothing to do with issuing new licenses. The regime will consist of management of the 18,000 licenses.
The validity of the license will not be more than 5 years for the time being. If the service is satisfactory, we will extend or renew the license. So there are a number of conditions. For example, number of taxis per fleet. So between 300 to 600 taxis. We have considered the current operating conditions in the trade, and for the time being, in the preliminary period, there may be 3 to 6 fleets, but this is not really a limit. We hope that the fleets can be well operated so that people have confidence in the system, that this can help the taxi trade. Apart from the number of taxis, there are other conditions. For example, the vehicle type. So for example, there must be wheelchair accessible taxis. The age of vehicle cannot be too old, and there are also requirements on in-car devices. There must be, for example, e-payment system and Wi-Fi and so on. Besides, we will ask the operator to provide online service. So the platform can allow passengers to book vehicles, and at the same time they can also rate taxi drivers' performance. They can either commend or criticize the drivers. So there is the need for some investment for fleet management. We offer incentives to attract operators or taxi trade members to apply for the license. First, after discussing with the trade, we know that they would like to actually design their own taxi livery and marking in order to build a brand so that passengers will know that, for example, a certain color or a certain design means that the taxi can provide good quality service. At the airport and cross-boundary points, we will designate holding waiting areas for these fleets. And by means of different channels, for example, government websites, the e-mobility app, and also tourism board and TD, publicity can be done for the fleets. So tourists will know that if they take these taxis, they can enjoy good service when they are in Hong Kong. With regard to fares, we propose that fleet taxis should charge according to the same fare schedule as in the case of ordinary taxis, but they may charge a booking fee on top of the metered fare so that there can be flexibility for the fleet. So they can charge more for a certain type of cars, or they can also charge booking fees, higher booking fees during peak hours. So there will be some flexibility here. The third measure is increasing maximum passenger seating capacity of taxis. So right now, the limit is 5, and this will be increased to 6. We have discussed with the taxi trade, and in general, the overall view is that more choices and options can be offered to passengers, and taxis will become more competitive in the market. This is not a rigid rule. Not all taxis have to have seating capacity of 6. It depends on operational needs for people to decide whether they want to buy 6 passenger seats vehicles. The fourth measure is introducing TDOP system. So we propose that we can take reference from ordinary driving offense points system. So in case of more severe offenses, a TDOP system can be put in place. We suggest that it cover 11 offenses to be divided into 3 levels and be assigned with 10, 5, and 3 points respectively. Here you can see 11 offenses. The first 4 are very serious offenses, including overcharging, refusal to hire, defacing, damaging, or altering a taximeter, and so on. So these are offenses that will be committed deliberately. So we suggest a penalty of 10 points. And then for items 5 to 8, they are less serious offenses. For example, not using the most direct route and so on. So you may think that these are serious offenses, but then there is element of subjectivity. Sometimes drivers think that a certain route will be smoother, but this may not be the view of passengers. In case of dispute or subjectivity, we believe that less points can be taken off, so we suggest 5 points. And then items 9 to 11, these are milder offenses. For example, the taxi driver may have forgotten to issue receipt, so we suggest 3 points for that. Within 2 years, if 8 points have been taken, then TD will give an advice giving or stating the number of points taken. And the taxi drivers will be reminded to improve their quality. And if a driver has incurred 10 or more points, then he or she will have to attend a compulsory taxi service improvement course. If he can complete the course and pass the exam, then he can have 3 points deducted. But then if a taxi driver has incurred 15 points or more, then he will be disqualified for some time. So the initial disqualification will be 3 months. But then after that, he will be disqualified for 6 months if there is repeated offense. Apart from the TDOP, we suggest a 2-tier penalty system. Again, this is for more serious offenses. For example, overcharging, refusal to hire, or defacing, damaging, or altering a taximeter. Apart from the existing penalties, $10,000 fine and maximum imprisonment term of 6 months. If in the case of repeated offense, then the fine will be $25,000. Maximum imprisonment penalty will be 12 months. We hope that the TDOP and the 2-tier penalty system will be effective in penalizing or punishing the poor performing taxi drivers so as not to affect the image of the taxi trade. Then finally, increasing penalties for illegal carriage of passengers for hire or reward. So through publicity, education, and law enforcement, the government has been discouraging people to commit this offense. Apart from this, we propose that the penalty should be increased from maximum fine, and also the period for suspension of vehicle license and impoundment of vehicles will be also lengthened. So these are the 5 measures that I would like to explain in terms of timetable. Our goal is that between May and June, we will table the legislative proposal to LegCo. And then the taxi fare increase application involves subsidiary legislation that will be dealt with first. And for the other 3 proposals, they involve amendments to the principal legislation. So we will table the amendments to LegCo as soon as possible. Concerning taxi fleet management, there are still a lot of details to work on. So we will discuss with the trade, we will discuss with members. So by the end of this year, we hope that all details can be set out, and then the legislative proposal can be tabled for LegCo scrutiny. That's all from me. Thank you. Now we have 60 minutes for this item. 60 members have pressed the button. So I will give each member 4 minutes. So please make good use of the time. So I will see later whether I can allow more time. After the first member has spoken, I will draw a line because we won't have enough time for all members. Now let me read out the order. Mr. Lee Chun-kang is the first member, and then Tan Ka-biu, Chan Wei-chun, Leung Wing-kun, Chan Siu-hong, Chen Wing-yan, Chao Siu-chung, Chang Yan-yu, Lam Siu-lo, Lo Chung-hong, Michael TIEN Puk-sun, Lau Kwok-fan, Chen Heng-bin, Lee Sai-wing, Yim Kong, and Lau Yip-kang. So 4 minutes for each member. Mr. Lee Chun-kang, please. Thank you, Chairman. So I have noted the taxi fare increase application. And some time ago, I did an analysis based on some data. First of all, in 2014, there was a taxi fare increase, and there was another increase in 2017. And this time, they proposed an increase from $24 to $30. I think this is reasonable because of the following reasons. From 2016 to 2020, the composite consumer price index had risen 10.6%. So this is inflation, overall inflation. And this has not taken into account inflation in these 2 years. And for taxi fares, after it was adjusted in 2017, drivers' income and fringe benefit. Now, comparing with other members of the transport trade, they have annual leave, MPF, sickness leave, and so on. So the income and fringe benefits, comparing with other members of the transport sector, actually fell behind by like 39%. So the two numbers added together equal to almost 50%. And then there are also maintenance expenses, miscellaneous expenses. There's an increase by 40 to 56%. And in 2016, comparing with 2021 in terms of insurance premium, there's an increase by 86% and 100%. So this time, if you ask me about the taxi fare increase rate, I think it is reasonable. However, I would like to make a point about catching up with the gap. As stated in the paper, taxi drivers' monthly income is 18,100 to 19,600, not even 20,000. For other members of the transport trade, 22,000. So taxi drivers' income falls a lot behind other members of the transport trade. So it is difficult to attract new joiners. In 2017, early 2017, after the fare increase, average income rose 10.9% for taxi drivers. But then in 2017, if the fare increase was smaller, then their income could only rise 4.8%. So this time, we're talking about an increase of $6. So 20.3% on average. But then it is still not enough to catch up with the gap. So I think there can be a regular review of taxi fare increase by TD. Right. Who would like to respond from the government? Thank you, Chairman. First, let me thank Mr. Lee for his comments. This time, our measures are to enhance the professional image and quality service of taxi drivers. And we also want the trade to be attractive enough for taxi drivers and owners to put in place enhancement measures. So after all these measures are adopted, including fare increase, we hope to improve the overall performance of the taxi trade. We want to make sure that in our public transport system, there are different modes of transport. They have their own positioning and roles. We hope that there will be sustainability and financial viability in the operating environment. Thank you. Mr. Lee Chun-kang, any follow-up? Chairman, Secretary, I would like to say that for all modes of transport, regular fare increase is really essential. Why? Because we have to strike a balance between their income and inflation. If they are allowed to increase fares once every few years, well, they apply for fare increase in 2018 and now it's 2022. There is a time gap of 4 years already. So they would never be able to catch up with inflation. So they won't be able to find good drivers. They can't offer good service. This is a chicken egg paradox. So Secretary, can you think of a regular fare increase mechanism for all modes of transport, including taxis?
All right, next, Mr. Bill Tang. Thank you, Chairman. This is lengthy paper covering a number of topics, not just the taxi trade. At this moment, the whole transportation trade is in dire straits. Fare increase could help increase drivers' income, and it is understandable. My concern is this: when you have black sheep in the family, and that the administration would like to address the black sheep in the taxi trade and improve the taxi services, our trade is of the view that taxi drivers bear the brunt, and I'm referring to the TDOP system. Now, say not taking a direct route. We do have some very serious cases targeting tourists, but there are other circumstances. For example, a driver may take the initiative to ask a passenger, say, this takes a longer route with more traffic lights, and if you're in a hurry, you should take the other route, so and so. And then the passenger may not have the necessary knowledge. They may have picked the wrong route and then file a complaint later. And there are also taxi drivers being subjects of complaint because of their political stance. I want to know whether the Transport Department is ready for offenses such as driving to a destination other than the most direct practicable route. May I know how you conduct investigation to substantiate these claims? Because we're talking about deducting points from professional drivers, and 10 points each time means that if they incur 3 complaints, they will be disqualified. The other point is about fleet management. Or the taxi fleet management regime. It's supposed to be on equal footing, but then there could be a surcharge during busy hours, so on and so forth. The original idea is to apply the flat rates across the board, but you allow them to charge extra. This may be a wise decision, but then if you allow flexibility of the fleet management to charge more, and then I'm concerned, because according to the annex, I see that in terms of the relationship between the fleet management and the drivers being hired, that should come in a proper proportion, and the trade union is concerned because only employed drivers can provide stable and quality services. Let me first take the question on the fleet license regime, and then Ms. Law can take the question on penalties. According to the member's question, there is a requirement of employing a certain number of drivers in the fleet. But then we have situations where the owner of the taxi is also the driver of the taxi. So should we allow the owner to join the fleet? And we need to consider other factors. If the owner is allowed to join, whether he should be able to employ others. However, we do consider different views in our proposal, and I defer to Ms. Law to take a question on penalties. I thank the member for his concern on the DTOP system. Now, first of all, what definitely will not happen is that we will not casually penalize any driver based on any claim or complaint. Just like the existing driver offense point system, we have the whole regime comprising summons, court proceedings, sentencing, and we'll make sure all these steps are put in place. And we agree with Mr. Tang's suggestion that there may be cases of dispute. We have taken on board the trade's view, and we have adjusted the original proposed penalty from 10 points to 5 points. The other point is that we will we will require the fleet to install the so-called car cameras. And in fact, cameras have been installed in taxis anyway, especially last year. there was a case in which a taxi driver was assaulted whilst driving. Now, in cases of dispute, the footage of the car cameras, or at least the audio clip, could help drivers substantiate their argument. And this is indeed the justification put forward by the taxi trade. The video footages should help drivers seek justification. We're not only siding with passengers. Right, there is also another question. Let's see if another member would ask the same, and then you have the chance to answer. The time is up. Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. I think it's common refrain that the public tends to criticize taxi services. So there are different ways to enhance the quality of taxi services. And there have been different ideas floated, including premium taxi services. And anyway, I understand that this fare increase application entails a substantial increase due to various factors. This is understandable. One of the criteria for consideration is public acceptability. But when it comes to public acceptance, are you just talking about the fare level or the quality as well? Because despite poor quality delivered, they are still putting forward a fare increase application. Now, I support the fleet regime being introduced. The threshold is 300 taxis, I understand. How did you come by this number? Because I see that the largest fleet at the moment is 583 and the second largest is 200. How do you attract other private owners to join the fleet? Are you confident that such a fleet management regime can be set up to enhance taxi services? There are also the prevalence of online hailing apps or other illegal forms of carriage of passengers. Who will take the question, please? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions. We are confident in the taxi fleet management proposal. We've been liaising with different stakeholders, and we understand that many people are willing to pay more for personalized and point-to-point transportation service. We are also aware of the use of technology. We are neutral on this point, and we welcome wider use of technology. In fact, for fleet management, we welcome the use of technology such as Wi-Fi and electronic payment system. And like the member said, some passengers are willing to pay more for better service that is point-to-point and personalized transportation service. And this is a good opportunity. It is also a good opportunity for the taxi trade to enhance the quality of the service, to, first of all, attract more passengers, and second, to help increase the driver's income. And this will provide an incentive to attract new blood to the trade. In other countries, in fact, you may notice that in some major cities, the taxi drivers are actually suited up. And I think it is Hong Kong people's aspirations to see better and higher quality taxi services. And we'll continue to consider different comments. Mr. Chair, do you have any follow-up? About the minimum fleet size, 300, the threshold is too high. And also factors for considering fare increase application, will you consider quality of taxi service? We are talking about 18,000 taxis and they go by the meter. If we include the quality factor, right now, there is a system that allows passengers to call the taxi centers. I think it's better to set up a proper fleet management regime for taxis. As for the threshold of 300 taxis per fleet as a minimum, we need to consider the portfolio in the market. For example, we have 18,000 taxis in the market, and then we need to find out how many of them are privately owned and how many will join the fleets to be set up. And having considered these factors, we believe the range of 300 to 600 to be appropriate, but we'll continue to seek views. Next. Mr. Yeoman Kit, am I coming through? Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'm not opposed to a fare increase. At the moment, both owners and taxi drivers are facing a lot of difficulties because of increase in fuel costs and rental. Now, the proposed increases, I think, however, are too substantial. I think that you should consider public affordability and adjust the rate of increase accordingly. And also in the future, a system should be set up so that there is oversight on the level of taxi rental and fare increase, because taxi owners tend to increase the rent once fare increase applications are passed. We need to make sure taxi drivers can actually receive more income. And I also welcome the other proposal to increase the maximum passenger seating capacity. The taxis will become more spacious and it will be time saving and cost saving for passengers as well. As for the DOP system and two-tier penalty system, I support those as well. However, about 6 months disqualification from driving, I don't think this penalty is effective enough. For taxi drivers, they find it all right. If they can't drive a taxi, they would drive a lorry instead. So in terms of disqualification, I think that the better or other forms of penalties should be introduced to keep taxi drivers on their toe. Secretary. Well, the fare increase application is just a preliminary proposal. Like the Deputy Secretary just explained, we will take into account different factors and our final decision will be announced in due course. Commissioner Law will also respond to the other point about rent and the fare increase. Rental increase. On this point, indeed, we have no oversight of this matter because after all, it's regulated by the commercial principles, and we need to provide flexibility and autonomy to taxi owners. However, during each fare increase, there is a tacit understanding that the taxi owners should not increase rent in the initial period because of the possible drop in the number of passengers right after a fare increase. However, we notice a phenomenon. Despite a drastic drop of passengers in the early period of the epidemic, between September and December last year, the number of passengers actually increased to 95% of the original level. As for the flag fall charges and the final income of drivers, both rose as well. As we understand from the trade unions, the taxi owners have been exercising prudence in increasing the taxi rental because they are unable to attract new drivers. And if the rent is too high, at the end of the day, nobody will drive these taxis and owners suffer a loss as well. Meanwhile, we'll continue to liaise with the taxi trade associations and we'll also keep in view the situation. The other point is that when we talked about fare increase for taxis in the past, some drivers would rather not see an increase of fares because of possible drop in the number of passengers. On this occasion, however, there seems to be a unanimous view from owners and drivers that there should be a fare increase.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Chan Siu-hong. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I express my support for the government to adopt measures to improve the operating environment for the trade and to enhance the overall service quality. I think this is in line with expectations of members of the public who would like to enjoy good quality taxi service. Well, I would like to make a point on taxi fare increase application. I do not object to such increase because actually the last increase took place in April 2017. It has been 5 years already. So now I think it is the right time to review and adjust taxi fare. I think members of the public and the taxi trades are most concerned about the rate of increase, and this is not much discussed in the paper. So I hope a balance can be struck between taxi trades expectation and public expectation. Of course, if the fare increase is too small, then that is not satisfactory to the trade. But then if it is too high an increase, that is not acceptable to the public. Well, after considering the factors in para 6, what is the reasonable rate of increase from government's perspective? I think the operating data are clear. I think the government has already got a range in their mind. My second question is about taxi fleet. Just now, Mr. Tony Zhang mentioned the 300 taxis as a lower limit. Why is it that 200 and 250 cannot meet the condition? If they can offer better conditions of service, I think these numbers can also be considered. When the road network in the new territories and Lantau are getting more comprehensive with the development of Northern Metropolis and also Lantau tomorrow, I think the roles of urban area, new territories and Lantau taxis have changed. Have you got the plan to review such system and so that adjustments can be made to this categorization of these 3 types of taxis? Secretary, thank you, member, for the comments. In adjusting taxi fare, we need to strike the right balance. We have to consider public acceptance, and there is different degree of public acceptance for short haul trips. Well, if we are talking about the last mile back to home, then if the flag-fall fare increases a lot, then they may not find it reasonable. And what about long haul? So we have to take all these factors into consideration. In considering the whole matter, we will try our best to fulfill public expectations. Now, concerning the lower limit of 300 to 600, that's our preliminary idea. We think that it is reasonable. If we hear different comments, we will consider alternative fine-tuning, but we need to seriously consider the matter because we have done a lot of work before proposing. Concerning the Northern Metropolis development, well, if different types of taxis are integrated, unless if we have a way to limit the scope of operation of taxis to a certain area, or if the distribution is more even, then most taxis will go to the most crowded or busy areas to get business. We do understand, for example, for Lantau taxis, blue taxis, the total number is small. However, if business decreases and if they go to other districts to offer service, then Lantau residents will have less chance to get taxi service. So we do understand your views about long-term development in Hong Kong. We will also pay attention to the situation. In the future, no matter what color taxis we're talking about, if the distribution so allows, we will consider certain adjustment. Okay, thank you. Next, Ms. Chen Wing-Yan. Thank you, Chairman. During this time, both the trade and members of the public face difficult times, and it is even more difficult for drivers. I don't agree with the administration that taxi rental increase is a commercial behavior, and the government has not much to do. Well, I hope that the government can play a more active role, because even if there is an increase in the fares, but then members of the public can't enjoy, and then the amount of money will all go to the taxi owners. Now, drivers are subject to traffic regulations, and if offenses are tiered, then I think actually some abstract terms are being used in the offenses. If you look at Annex D 5 and 6, items 5 and 6 talks about not using the most direct practicable route. There's a lot of gray area here. And the administration also said that there is element of subjectivity in terms of driving routes that would be affected by traffic condition. I have consulted some drivers, and taxi drivers are worried that they will inadvertently fall into the legal trap. However, the administration has not made a response. So you said that technology or cameras, dash cameras will be used, but how are you going to avoid arguments or conflicts? So for the point system, the number of points will be reduced from 10 to 5 in order to lower the penalty, but still 5 points is serious. So concerning offenses number 5 and 6, can you give more information so that the drivers can have a peace of mind and members of the public will know how to exercise their rights? And then regarding use of technology in 2018, 2019, and 2020, for convictions with regards to offenses about illegal carriage, the numbers are 221, 226, and 172. And then for the relating years, 39 vehicles are being detained or impounded. So is it true that in the past, technology was not used? So that's why the small number. Is it true that there are the offenses and the laws there, but it's difficult for law enforcement? The laws are there, but then the drivers, of course, the drivers are very cautious, and members of the public may not get the right protection. So can there be more information from the administration? Yes, thank you. Just now, Ms. Law already gave clear explanation. We are talking about statutory process. Hong Kong's judicial system is number one. Just now you said that there may be a argument or conflict between two parties. If the taxi driver asks the passenger to suggest route, well, sometimes I have the experience. The taxi driver told me that there was traffic congestion in front. So are you willing to accept a less direct route? If there is dash camera and if there are other corroborative evidence, then that is a defense. Besides, the benefits of doubt will go to the defendant. I think the court will handle the case fairly. Concerning law enforcement, I will defer to Patrick. Mr. Wong, yes, Chairman. Regarding law enforcement, as the Secretary said, usually there's the need for police investigation and also taking of statements. So the court will handle the case, and then the driver can also give defense. So based on past prosecution numbers, well, those numbers are reasonable. Unlike other complaints, that conviction will be made based on complaints. Just now, Ms. Wong said that after fare increase, will the drivers benefit? Well, this point is made in the paper, and there were past data showing that the drivers could benefit. Just now, Ms. Wong already explained, so I think she can elaborate later if there is the chance. Next, Mr. Chao Siu-chung. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Secretary. In principle, I support a certain amount of adjustment to taxi fare because there has been a few years where taxi fare has not been adjusted. And in para 9 of the paper, there are some data showing the income of rentee drivers, owner drivers, and rental owners. So they face very difficult operating environments. As you can see, taxi drivers, well, there are very few young people who aspire to become taxi drivers. Most are rather old in age. So I think we need to find ways to improve their operating environment so that there will be new blood joining the trade. Fare increase is one consideration. Just now, the administration said both drivers and owners support this fare increase, but then among taxi drivers whom I communicated with, they are quite worried. Some said they'd rather that there is no fare increase because with fare increase, then the owners, the taxi owners will increase rental. Besides, public propensity to take taxi will also decrease if fare is increased. So will the administration do an assessment? So there has been a few years where taxi fare has not increased. So will there be a more scientific analysis on the change of amount of business with a certain degree of fare increase? Besides, on rental increase agreement with owners, can we make sure that the rentee drivers can actually benefit from an increase in income after fare is increased? Regarding operating environment, for example, designation of taxi stands and also restricted zones, can there be some ways to facilitate taxi drivers to take on passengers? Secretary, thank you, Chairman. Regarding owners and drivers, of course, thank you, Mr. Chow, for your concern for taxi drivers. Actually, in the past, we communicated with the taxi trade very frequently. And in fact, I have conversations with drivers and individual taxi owners and taxi companies. Some drivers are worried about fare increase, but if there is no fare increase in the long run, no one will be a taxi driver. So in the past 10 odd years, I have been communicating with the taxi trade. As Ms. Law said, at the beginning of fare increase, rental will stay the same for some time. So that with the fare increase, well, for a short period of time, there may be fewer passengers. And so when the situation stabilizes, rental will be adjusted. This is a fact. And if you look at the public transport market, well, MTR, taxis, minibuses, and buses, in the past years, actually the breakdown or market share of each is rather stable. Now, Ms. Law can comment on the impact on taxi drivers and rental. For drivers, when it comes to quality improvements, well, that will be beneficial. For taxi drivers, passengers will have more confidence and more passengers will take taxis. So this time we have put in place a number of recommendations to improve quality. Just now, for example, Mr. Chao Siu-chung and other members referred to taxi rental. As the Secretary said, we will be in close touch with owners. At present, we are handling another issue, and that is how to stabilize taxi insurance premium. For those professional taxi drivers with good track record, well, no matter whether they rent taxis or what in the market, they will have higher bargaining power. For taxi drivers with good track record, well, we hope that insurance premium can be adjusted favorably so that owners can also lower costs. I think the ecology will be different from the past. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Gary Zhang. Mr. Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I don't object to the fare increase. Second, I want to ask the government whether the government has looked into the fact that online hailing apps, since introduced in 2014, have developed quite rapidly, offering more choices to passengers. This is because of their clear competitive edge in terms of quality of transport service and the convenience. According to the Hong Kong U Public Opinion Program, online hailing apps would help promote development of a smart city, and respondents agree that this will the use of technology would help develop smart city, and 60% of respondents agree that the service should be developed, and 64% of respondents agreed that we should no longer protect the traditional industries, and there are also 70% of respondents agreeing that the government should regulate the car sharing industry. So the government should heed the majority view, and there should be more regulation. This, in fact, in a green report or a green paper published by the relevant organization, these are ideas put forward. But we don't see any analysis of these points in the government's paper. I think the government should consider that in midst of the epidemic, many people have turned to become such drivers to make ends meet. Under such circumstances, the government should be very careful. You should not take a broad brush approach. I hope the government will consider very carefully. Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Zhang, for his comments. Online booking of point-to-point transportation services. Well, on this point, the government keeps an open mind. As said on various occasions, in terms of introduction of technology in transportation services, we are open-minded. But then in order to operate this service in Hong Kong, you need to be law-abiding as well. Under the current laws of Hong Kong, it is illegal to take reward from passengers without a license. Now, online booking is possible, but then you need a license, a carrier license to operate lawfully. There are different circumstances in different cities. As mentioned before, for point-to-point transport services in Hong Kong, taxis constitute the majority of such services, followed by some hire cars under special circumstances. They have helped build the business environment and the ecology, and there's a need to provide stability on our part. We need stability to make sure that drivers can make a living. Now we're talking about some 46,000 taxi drivers helping out under the anti-epidemic fund, and they're eligible for subsidies in providing point-to-point designated services. So we need to be careful and we need to ensure stability, but I share your view on the use of technology. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chairman. In the current environment in Hong Kong, it is really difficult to operate the taxi business or drive taxis. If we compare ourselves with other cities around the world, the taxi fares in Hong Kong are on the low side. So I agree that we should increase taxi fares in Hong Kong. However, from the public's perspective, we need to ensure it's value for money. In other words, we need to address the long-standing issues of the quality of taxi services. I think that we should provide appropriate incentives together with penalties as a form of deterrence to ensure that quality can be enhanced. And I see that a holistic review has been conducted, and I appreciate that. And I support wider use of technology to minimize disputes. In the future, I think the government will discuss with the relevant trades on matters relating to, say, privacy. And I hope that a more detailed account will be given to the public in due course. About fleet management, about livery and marking, and the use of technology, what is more important is the quality of drivers. A regulatory regime can be introduced to help enhance the quality of service. But on attracting new blood, I don't see anything on the paper. I don't see anything in the paper that is persuasive enough. The license validity period will be reduced from 3 years to 1 year. I mean, the validity for applying for a license, validity period will be reduced to 1 year. But I don't think this is a major incentive. What are the incentives for attracting new blood? Are we talking about enhancing the taxi service and improving the business environment? What are the advantages? I'd like to hear more from the administration on how the taxi trade can be sustainable in the long run. Secretary, thank you. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Lam, for his comments. These comments are well made. These are accurate observations. Overall speaking, our proposals seek to bring vibrancy to the taxi trade. And I agree with Mr. Lam that talent, of course, is the most important factor. We need to consider, for example, how the choices of young people as they enter the workforce. Now, you know, some university graduates become bus drivers because they are really passionate about buses. So if it is a young person's aspiration to become a driver, will he be driving a lorry or a bus or a taxi? We need to enhance the image of the trade whilst making sure that the income will be sufficient to help him make ends meet. There should be training so as to make young people's aspiration met whilst making his end meet as well. And at the same time, there should be training courses for drivers. And only when you pass a test will you be able to drive the taxi. And there are also requirements on the taxis, say specifications, the appearance and the attitude of drivers. If we take this whole package, we will help younger drivers feel satisfied. The next point is about technology. If we adopt technology more widely, it will be attractive to younger drivers to drive a taxi with so many gadgets equipped. Of course, we welcome further comments from members, including Mr. Lam, on how we can attract younger drivers to join the trade. Next, Mr. Michael Look. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, this paper puts forward the enhancing proposals on personalized and point-to-point transport services, and I've actually consulted the relevant associations. First, in your consultation exercise, has the government consulted labor unions, not just taxi associations or the trade associations? You should consult labor unions as well. There are wide repercussions because your data don't seem to tally with the reality. Well, indeed, some taxi owners have reduced rental and there is a mismatch. Some taxis are left idle, but in terms of drivers' income, comparing to the pre-Black Riot level in 2019, there should be a significant drop, not a moderate increase, as your data have suggested. We are perplexed. Is it true that taxi drivers are still earning $19,000 a month? Well, I don't know. Maybe some aggressive drivers may offer discounts in order to attract more passengers. But for the majority of law-abiding drivers, they don't earn as much as $19,000 a month. Second point, in paragraph 15 of the paper, according to the administration's description, the taxi fleet management regime is an overhaul to the whole trade. I don't think it's a fundamental change. Mr. Frank Chan, you should not use the rhetoric of an advertiser, because if you have no change in the fare structure and no certainty in the employee-employee relationship, you do have a small paragraph stipulating that you should maintain an employee-employer relationship with a certain proportion of fleet drivers, so on and so forth. But then, frankly, it all boils down to self-discipline, and it doesn't work in an environment in such an environment in Hong Kong. In the past, the taxi trade did make an effort based on self-discipline to no avail. After all, it's just a voluntary proposal. I really don't see it being supported to a great extent. I don't see how taxi drivers would stand to benefit. I have this feeling that the administration is now putting the idea of a premium taxi service on the back burners because of the pressure from the trade associations. And now you've come up with a fleet proposal. It's operated on a voluntary basis. Unlike the mainland model, is entirely voluntary. So Secretary, how can you make sure that there will be a fundamental change or a fundamental revamp? Are you giving way to the trade associations? Previously, you tried a different idea, the franchise taxi model. Why doesn't the government give it another chance? You have 15 seconds, Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Fleet management is indeed a fundamental revamp. Well, at the moment, we say the taxi drivers should so and so, but by the time when the proposal is actually implemented, it will be made a requirement. And then I will defer to Mr. Wong to explain further. Using the principle of anonymity, we collect data from taxi flags, and then we conduct an analysis. And usually for rentee drivers, the major sources of expenses are for the fuel costs and the rent. And then we take the average, of course, with fluctuations in the real data. But then after all, these are objective and reliable data. Next, Mr. Michael TIEN. Thank you, Chairman. In terms of monitoring the quality of service and enforcement, I think you've left out a very important element. That is, you should make the installation of CCTV on taxis a compulsory requirement. Back in 2016, I made the same proposal for the protection of drivers as well as passengers and to avoid disputes. And in 2018, the Privacy Commissioner commented that as long as there are markings inside the taxi compartment telling passengers that they are being recorded via CCTV, it will be all right. And you just said that many taxi drivers have installed cameras, and you will continue to encourage more drivers to install the same. But if you do not make it a requirement for taxi fleets, then all I see is that there will be more disputes in the future, and it will not be deterrent enough.
If passengers are worried about privacy, then they can go for taxis with no dash camera. And then, well, this can be up to passengers' choice. I think the most important thing is that the drivers cannot delete or alter the clip content. So if there are complaints, they can produce those as evidence, and they can be viewed. The clips can be viewed with someone's supervision. So I think that for taxi fleet, it is mandatory that each and every taxi in the fleet should be equipped with the dash camera. So only with that will I support this item. What is your stance? Secretary, thank you, Chairman. Yesterday, Mr. Tian exchanged views with my colleagues, so I will ask Ms. Law to supplement. Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Tian explained the help and function of CCTV to us. That is very important. For both drivers and passengers, they agree that CCTV can offer a certain degree of protection. So Mr. Tian, please rest assured, for all taxis in the fleet, we will ask that they be equipped with CCTV. Will the CCTV only show the drivers, not the passengers? Well, we will listen to people's views, but then we also need to consider feasibility. Well, if only one party is shown, then there is not enough protection for the other party. But as Mr. Tian said, we need to have enough signage telling passengers and drivers that this vehicle is equipped with dash camera. Now, if the video records can be viewed and altered by anyone readily, then that is not desirable. The best way is that there must be a back-end operation, and if there is really the need, the video recording will be used. So we hope Mr. Tian will support us. We will ask that the fleet and all vehicles in the fleet be equipped with CCTV. Well, Secretary, the long run, I think in the long run, all taxi operators will be subject to the penalties, not only those in the fleet. So for the long run, for taxis which do not join the fleet, now equipment or dash camera is not mandatory. So I hope that passengers can also differentiate the taxis. And what are the incentives that you will offer to taxi operators to install a dash camera? As Mr. Tian said, technology is quite mature now. As Ms. Law said, in the future, if you consider the cloud storage technology, if the use of such technology is more popular and cost is low, then basically, in terms of protection of privacy and information confidentiality, if these can be ascertained, then I'm sure this will be the way forward. Thank you. Yes, actually, there are these technologies. So the video recording will not be controlled by the drivers. It will be stored in the cloud. Next, Mr. Yu Pak Leung. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Now, the trade and members of the public are concerned about the stability of point-to-point transport service, especially about aviation. Now, with the flight ban or restrictions, there are like 5 routes that have already been banned. So are you going to put in place some measures so that the flights can be more stable? Well, Mr. Yu, we are here to talk about transport matters, right? We're talking about point-to-point transport service and personalized service. Actually, the sector all along has been concerned about service quality of taxis, and given this current operating environment, taxi fleet management and taxi fare increase and the new penalty system, well, I agree to the direction of all these because they will help enhance taxi service quality and improve Hong Kong's image as an international tourist destination. Concerning point-to-point service, well, I want to talk about hire car permits. As the secretary said at the beginning, such permits are for hotels, travel agencies, and the tourism sector to apply for a special business purpose. But then according to the trade, it is almost impossible to apply for such permits. According to the law, there is the upper limit of 1,500 such permits. So at present, how many such hire cars are available? Can the upper limit be raised so that it is easier for the trade to apply? Then in the future, the tourism sector can also go for some transformation. After the pandemic, in the future, I think in terms of traveling, well, people will travel in small groups. And for personalized service or in-depth traveling service, I think these will be very popular. So in the future, can there be some room for transformation in the trade? Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Yu referred to point-to-point service. For example, for hotels and the tourism sector, there is a quota. And if you are talking about overall transformation of taxi, I think we are talking about professional fleet management. And I think in this way, there will be orderly and stable reform of the trade. Now, let me ask Ms. Law to supplement regarding quota of hire cars. Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Yu. I do understand that the tourism sector has certain demand for hire cars. And in the past few years, we introduced some enhancement measures. So we will do some preliminary evaluation of applications received. In the past 4 to 5 years, there was increase for permits for limousine and also luxury cars, cross-boundary permits. Actually, there was 60 to 80% increase. Now, we are not talking about a big number, only 500 to 600 cars, but this is a big increase. In the past 2 years, because of the pandemic, there was less demand in the tourism sector. And after the border is reopened, are there ways to help the tourism sector in terms of hire cars if they do have the need? Can more be approved? Well, I think we can discuss with Mr. Yu on another occasion. Of course, we do have a statutory upper limit at 1,500, as said just now. And up till now, this quota has not been used up yet. Right, Mr. Chen Hangbun. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding fleet management approach proposed by the government again, I welcome this move. Well, are we talking about a small number of taxis going into the fleet, or most cars, most taxis will be under this fleet management arrangement, because the fare will affect the success of the scheme. If things are not attractive, if there are not some attractive measures as incentives for the taxi operators, then I think that this fleet management system will not be delivering fundamental benefits. Now, according to the government's proposal, we're talking about a booking fee, and then for the other fees, they will be the same as ordinary taxis. Then what is the incentive? So the vehicles will be of better type, more comfortable, then they will take away all the passengers. Then for standalone individual taxis, well, their room for survival will be smaller. They won't be able to get passengers. For the overall taxi ecosystem, will it be more appropriate to have two different charging systems so that the taxi fleets can charge higher fares, and then the other taxis will also have some room for survival? If we are talking about more comfortable taxis, then for the ordinary taxis, the taxis may be more aged and they won't be able to attract passengers. So apart from booking fee, I hope that there will be some difference in the overall charging mechanism. Then the taxi fleets will be more attractive. And for those taxis not joining fleets, they will have some room for survival. Besides, in the past few years, we received some complaints from the trade on illegal carriage of passengers for reward. Now, we have come across cases where there were traffic accidents eventually, and people were injured and they were not able to get compensation. The company was not responsible, and the members of the public actually were the victims. And now penalty will be enhanced, and then this will be deterrent to the taxi driver. However, for the back office, for the back end, there is no adjustment to the penalty. So will there be some kind of abetting, some offenses relating to abetting and so on, so that this kind of illegal carriage can be better eradicated? Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chen referred to due diligence work or offense related to abetting. I know that there is this kind of work being done. I won't supplement. Concerning taxi fleet fees or fleet management vis-a-vis existing taxi model and the percentage, well, I want to say that there is a consensus in society that we need an order in implementing this proposal to make sure that it is effective and stable. We need to take into consideration public expectations. Some members of the public are willing to pay more to enjoy a better quality point-to-point transport service. However, some members of the public do enjoy existing taxi service. So in the process, we need to keep monitoring the situation. And then we can make a decision on the way forward gradually. Mr. Chen talked about standalone taxis. We said that the professional fleet is an employment relationship, but then there would be a certain percentage. We can discuss that. And if standalone or individual taxi operators want to join, then we will follow up on how to take on that. Next, Mr. Yim Kong. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Under the pandemic, taxi drivers' income decreased a lot, much lower than the average income level of the transport sector. And on the whole, I support reasonable fare increase for taxis. At the same time, I hope that the Bureau will consider the following two factors. First, when the pandemic is over, there will be a lot more inbound tourists. If fare increase is too big, then there would be some pressure on travelers' costs, and that will be impact on the tourism sector. Besides, if you consider future trends, there will be more and more electric taxis. And so oil price impact to taxis will be smaller and smaller. And if you increase fare in the future, it is very, very difficult to reduce it. So this time I suggest that the fare increase should not exceed 20%. And Mr. Chen Wengben said, perhaps we can consider fare increase of 2 tiers. So for new cars below 2 years old, the fare increase can be higher than the older vehicles. Of course, new cars are more comfortable than old ones. For the older taxis, they can charge a lower fare to attract more passengers. Besides, I think there should be more safety management on older taxi drivers. These are my 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Yim Kong, for his comments. Of course, in finalizing the fare increase, we'll make sure that the rate of increase is proportional and reasonable. And we also have timetable for achieving zero carbon emission. I understand that after 2035, no fuel propelled vehicles will run in Hong Kong. And we still have time until 2035, but we do consider in future the type of taxis to run in the streets of Hong Kong. On the other comments made, we will go back and consider your views. Any follow-up from Mr. Yim? Right, thank you. Next, Mr. Lee Sai-weng. Thank you, Chairman. The administration just now briefed us on the fleet management proposal. I understand that in other countries, taxis form its own unique culture. And in other countries, they usually have taxi fleets and they're well equipped and regulated. I welcome the administration's proposal. However, you should make an all-out effort. From the last term of electrical and to this term, from the beginning of this term of government, and we're approaching the end of this government term, I do hope that you can give me a timetable. A number of questions on the taxi fleet. I understand that a fleet should comprise some 300 to 600 taxis. Do you have a minimum fleet size? Because I share other members' concerns that standalone taxis, non-fleet taxis may be marginalized and they may not benefit from the regime. The next point about fares. We understand that you have fare charging by the meter, and that's across the board, but I want to know whether you have any requirement on booking fees. If you call the taxi center to make a booking for a taxi, you will be paying additional charges to secure one, but then you're not protecting passengers. Say if many passengers live in a remote area and if they call to book a taxi all at the same time, there may be additional charges. I want to know whether you put a cap on the surcharge. The third point, the point of the proposal is to help improve the business environment of the taxi trade, but there are inadequacies in terms of facilities. For example, taxi stands. There aren't sufficient taxi stands. Many taxis just drive around to look for passengers. In other countries, however, there are proper taxi stands and areas for taxis to, tidy up the compartment whilst waiting for passengers. I come to my next point, and that is insurance premiums. There are issues leading to a rise in the insurance premiums for taxis, and then the cost is transferred onto passengers. That may account for this fare increase application. So are there ways to curb astronomical increase in insurance premium renewals for the taxi trade? Secretary. We have been liaising with the Insurance Authority and the Taxi Council on the matter, and we also agree that a database should be set up to collect data on, say, the driving record of individual drivers, and that the insurance industry can also draw reference from the database to make a decision on the level of premium on individual drivers based on his performance. Now, the member suggests that we should give an overhaul, and this is exactly what we want to do. Our next step is to draw up a bill, and we will take into account various comments, say whether the minimum fleet size should be 300 or lower, say 200, as suggested by other members. And anyway, the priority is to ensure the rights of passengers are protected. So this is about balancing exercise, and about the booking fees, we will consider whether to introduce an upper limit. Your time is up, Mr. Stanley Lee. I'm the last one for this round. Basically, I support the administration's proposal to set up a taxi management fleet regime. However, like other members mentioned, I don't think there is a sufficient incentive, except that there will be a designated area for the fleet to wait for passengers. But then this is not something new. I told the administration before that if you want to set up a taxi fleet, you need a back office for them, for back-end operation. Unlike the current standalone rentee driver mode. So you should look for short-term tenancy sites and then lease them to taxi fleet operators at a reasonable rent level for servicing and for setting up of an office for back-end operation, for say cleaning of taxis and perhaps charging of electric taxis. And only when you have all these equipped will you give sufficient incentive for the fleet operators to provide quality service. Another point is that in terms of transportation in Hong Kong, I think that there is excessive regulation. I think it's time for government to introduce deregulation. This is in fact the direction of current mainland policies. They're trying to deregulate many areas. And in fact, yesterday we received a letter from the taxi trade and the council, and this has been forwarded to the administration. The purpose of running a taxi fleet regime is to enhance the quality of service. You want to make it convenient instead of, say, requiring franchise bus companies to submit a financial report. This is not your purview. Your purview is to ensure that there is quality service, and you need to lay down a proportion for employees under a fleet, if you understand the ecosystem of the trade. Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. All these comments made are factors we need to consider in successfully introducing this regime. As I mentioned before, we're going to iron out the details and drop a legislative proposal, and meanwhile we will fully consider the views of stakeholders, legislative councillors, and the public. We understand that there are divergent views and suggestions, and we'll try to strike the most appropriate balance. Views are welcome. Thank you, Secretary. 15 members have spoken today, and I understand that basically members support the introduction of a taxi fleet management regime, and meanwhile, the administration will continue to consult stakeholders before finalizing the proposal about taxi fare increase. I understand that most members are not opposed to the application, only that there are views on the rate of increase. So I think this is for the administration to further explore and finalize the detail. And that's the end of this item. We now move on to the next item. Item 4, proposed creation of one supernumerary post of government engineer, D2, in the Transport Department to take forward the traffic and transport strategy study. That's LC paper CB bracket 4214/2022 bracket 04 and CB bracket 4214/2022 bracket 05, an updated background brief by the Secretariat. For smooth and orderly conduct of the meeting, I would now invite the staff to remove all the raise hand markings in Zoom. Now, members, if you want to speak, you can press the raise hand feature in Zoom. And let me remind members that in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, in relation to any items being discussed today, if there is any direct or indirect pecuniary interest, please disclose the nature of the interest before you speak. And let me welcome the administration to our meeting. And I now invite the administration to walk us through the paper. Who will help us, Mr. Yao or Ms. Wong? Right, I will deliver opening remarks, and then I will invite the Assistant Commissioner Leung to deliver a presentation. In October last year, we consulted the electrical panel on transport and briefed members on the concepts and objectives of the Traffic and Transport Strategy Study, or TTSS. And we set up a mechanism to further exchange with members' views on the TTSS. I will come to the TTSS in due course. It covers a very wide scope, and it will go on for a number of years. So we'll continue to further liaise with the panel on transport and other stakeholders, so that we'll continue to take your views and keep you engaged in the process. So we're here today to further brief members of the panel on transport in this new Legislative Council term, the TTSS, and also because of the extensive scope of the TTSS, we need to create a dedicated TTSS team, and we propose to create a supernumerary post of a government engineer D2 for a period of 4 years to take forward the TTSS. So I will brief members on the TTSS and seek members' support on this establishment proposal. So that concludes my remarks, and if I may, I will invite Assistant Commissioner Leung to give you a more detailed account of the study. Good morning, members. I will brief members on the Traffic and Transport Strategy Study, TTSS, and the proposed creation of the supernumerary post. I will first lay out the background, and then I will brief members on the progress of the TTSS and also the establishment proposal. Last year, at the panel on transport, we briefed members on the 3 comprehensive transport studies, CTS. Basically, the TTSS is built on the previous studies to review the overall transportation strategies in Hong Kong. The 3rd CTS was completed in 1999, and 5 directions were laid down. And these are better integration of transport and land use planning, 2, better use of railways as the backbone of the passenger transport system. 3, provision of better public transport services and facilities. 4, better use of advanced technologies in traffic management. And 5, formulation of better environmental protection transport measures. These 5 strategies remain applicable today in drawing up public transport strategies. And we have also completed a number of studies, such as the Railway Development Strategy and the Public Transport Strategy study. In terms of public transport, the public transport system had garnered international acclaim. In July last year, the McKinsey report revealed that in terms of Hong Kong's transport system, we ranked the first in 25 international metropolises in terms of sustainable development. Basically, public transport accounts for the total passenger boardings, 90% of the total passenger boardings.
When society develops, we face a lot of challenge in transport and traffic. For example, as in many large cities, we are affected by traffic congestion, and most workplaces are in the urban areas. So for those living in new towns and NDAs, they need to spend a lot of time in traveling. So it is more and more difficult for us to build new roads and railways. The cost is getting higher, and there are many other challenges in terms of public transport, especially from a financial point of view. And of course, we want to achieve the carbon neutrality goal as much as possible. For public transport, it has carried almost 90% of commuters, but there are still a small number that have to be coped with by private cars, but efficiency is low. In busy hours on major trunk roads, 70% of the road capacity handles 10% of private car carriage. Now, road resources are limited. It is difficult for us to build new roads to cope with future development needs. So we should be innovative and put in place some forward-looking measures and extend the planning period to the 2050 transport strategy blueprint. So based on the census done last year, well, this is the right time that we do the work, and we can make use of the new data. Last year, the Northern Metropolis Plan was announced, and this time in the study, we're going to integrate and also supplement to the existing studies, for example, studies on main trunk roads and railways, in order to come up with a comprehensive blueprint. Comparing with the past CTS, we believe that this time the study is going to be more challenging, and it incorporates a wider scope, so we need more manpower to do the work. Last year in October, in the transport panel, we already gave a briefing on 4 major areas. First, make good use of limited road service, and then we should be people-oriented and efficient in public transport service, green transportation, and an active commuting model. And we should integrate more with GBA cities. Now I will explain in greater detail. First of all, integration with GBA and facilitate the development of Northern Metropolis. In last year's plan, we already stated the heavy railway arrangement. That will be the skeleton. And it will be integrated with the 2030 Transport Infrastructure Report. Based on the North Metropolis, we will put in place some transport measures. In terms of integration with Greater Bay Area, we'll put in place cross-border railway so that it can integrate with some major transports. So people commuting to and from GBA will have a seamless connection as if they are in Hong Kong. For green transport in North Metropolis, a new generation green mass carrier system will be used to supplement to the railway system. Green transport, of course, it includes bicycles and also electric mobile devices, EMB. It is different from urban areas. In NDA, there are comprehensive cycling tracks, so bicycles and EMB can be the first connection or the last connection in the route. And then we hope that for these short haul trips, vehicles can be less used so that the overall environment can be more livable. Another important point is to enhance the support and integration between different public modes of transport so that there will be better connection. One measure is to improve the interchange arrangement. So we will put in place new generation transport interchange hub. So the more importance will be given to interchange among different modes of transport. Besides, people's daily needs will be better catered for, so as to encourage people to use more public transport. They don't need to rely on private cars. For personalized point-to-point transport service, so on taxi service, we are doing a study already for short to medium term. Just now we had a detailed discussion on the item. So taxi fleet management will be put in place to enhance taxi service. And then there will be on-demand transport booking service. And then for new energy and also autonomous driving technology, these will be looked into to provide point-to-point transport service. And then this will be the vision for our TTSS. Finally, in terms of road management, we will be innovative and we will use big data and technology to do smart motorway management. So among different cars and also between roads and vehicles, we will try to make good use of road space and to reduce the possibility of accidents. And then smart tools can help autonomous driving and also vehicle to everything development. We will attach importance to integration with GBA, hoping that future connection will see a better foundation. If we are able to achieve all these directions and objectives, what will happen to future mobility? Here's a video showing our vision. So now please play the video. George and family members live in Tuen Mun. They work in Wan Chai, and they don't want to have a very crowded environment, so they choose to drive. Many people drive to work. As a result, we suffer from traffic jam. In the future, if public modes of transport can be more convenient and comfortable, that would be great. So if we want change, then we need to do a better plan now. In the future, if buses can be booked with cell phone, then every morning, George can leave home at the right time, and then there will be definitely a seat for him. To improve efficiency, there will be large interchange for people to change among different modes. And then there will be one-stop service at the interchange so that people can wait for buses comfortably. And if people work overtime, then they can use the smartphone to book no-man vehicle, and then there will be smart motorway system so that the car can take the fastest route, and then there won't be traffic jam, and the situation will be safer and more convenient. My son will graduate soon. I know that the prospect in Tien Hai for technology is better. He wants to work there. So there may be a few days he needs to go to Tien Hai. For cross-boundary transport, you can use a mobile app to plan and book all the modes of transport in advance, including personal transport and point-to-point connection and high-speed rail. So with a QR code, you can change at Hong Shui Kiu. As in taking flights after online check-in, there is still time for people to engage in video conversation with girlfriends. And when it is time, they can then walk to the platform. A lot of time can be saved. My younger sister wants to go to school in the same district, and when she's in senior secondary, she wants to ride the bicycle to school. That is safer, that is more environment friendly and healthier. Yes, you can find the best bicycle route on cell phone, and then you can find a parking space in advance. If all vehicles and bicycles are equipped with sensors, then drivers will give way to bicycles. That will be safer. And all cars will be carbon-free in emission, and then air quality will be better on road surface. If you want change, then let's start planning now. The scenario shown just now represents future possibilities. We need detailed plan in order to put in place a very good transport blueprint for Hong Kong. There is still a lot of work to do. Now let's talk about the timetable. The consultancy contract only started 3 months ago, but we are planning different studies, for example, smart motorway and so on. So in the second half of the year, we can share our views about these studies. In the second half of the year, we will do a territory-wide CTS. or travel characteristics survey. So by second half of 2023, our goal is to give you an account on the progress of the TTSS, and then we will cooperate with other departments so that mature transport concepts will be integrated in their plans. And we will also come back to give you a briefing. Our goal is that by 2025, a detailed transport strategy can be published. As you can see, the study involves a lot of work. We need a very experienced senior government engineer to lead this study. And this engineer needs to supervise and manage the TTSS. He also has to come back to LegCo and give an account on the study progress on different occasions. He needs to coordinate with different government departments. He has to lead cross-departmental groups, and he needs to give guidance on the new transport guidelines and also the legislative framework. So he should be an assistant commissioner, and he will lead a team taking care of the engineering work and so on. After the third CTS in 1997, at that time, there were 21 people in the team. Now this TTSS is going to be more complicated. We suggest a 4-year term, a team with 9 people. And now we are only proposing to create 1 directorate grade position. So we hope that you will support us so that we can do a good job in our study. That's all in my presentation. Thank you. Thank you. 9 members have pressed the button to speak. We have 36 minutes left, so 4 minutes for each member. Tian Puk-sun, and then Chan Siu-hong, Chen Wei-chun, Lam Siu-lo, Yu Pak-lang, Lee Sai-wing, Chen Hang-ben, and Lo Wai-kwong, and finally, I myself. First one, Mr. Tian Puk-sun, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Referring to this paper and the need for such a strategy study, I am in agreement. However, I don't think it is comprehensive enough. I have 3 suggestions. First, concerning the 5 major strategic directions. Well, I think we need to consider one very important trend, and that is aging population. Now, elders account for 20%. By 2050, at the peak, 35%. So with so many elders in our population, that will affect traffic needs and also the network of modes of transport. Secondly, labor force. Now, no one wants to join the minibus trade, and in 2030, the situation will be even worse because there is not enough labor force. And if you talk about Kai-tak, you have been talking about autonomous driving for 10 odd years and environment-friendly monorail. And then after that, that plan was shelved and you asked people to use minibus to go to Kai-tak. So I think this is contradictory. So I think there is the need for the 6th major direction, and that is we need to cope with aging population, especially in relation to special traffic needs and not enough labor. In Hong Kong, I think, of course, we have gone through a lot of unpleasant things, but we need to have confidence. If we continue the study, do we have the will to set a goal or milestone for Hong Kong in terms of transport so that we can be the first to create a certain model? We need to have the determination and confidence. Will it be related to environmental protection or what? We can think further, but we need to have that goal. We hope other cities can learn from us. We should have that courage. Besides, there's a lack of KPIs. Yes, there is a blueprint, but how are we going to evaluate each government's performance comparing to the blueprint? Will there be some smaller feasible goals? And then there should be a review once every 5 years to see which goals are met, which are not. And then concerning ESG, economy, environmental friendliness, governance, and so on, I think there is the lack of KPIs. Now, in relation to the SARG's governance, I think the public wants KPIs more and more. So I hope that this can be done in this study. Bureau or department? Yes, let me take the question. Right, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Tang. We haven't forgotten aging population. Aging population is incorporated into all transport policies. I agree with Mr. Tang that the elders have their needs. This is an aging society, and mobility may be different from now. Well, accessibility is the basic thing, and just now Mr. Tang mentioned manpower. That is important. In the previous item, we talked about taxis. So we want to be forward-looking, and we want to reform some old industries like taxi trade. We want to attract newcomers. If our society is aging, then one day we may not have enough manpower. Just now we talked about autonomous driving technology. We hope that with that, some demands can be met.
But of course, this is impossible to phase out all public transport drivers. We need to consider, for example, whether autonomous driving will help us in certain ways, and this will surely be explored. As to the other point, we need to be confident, and we hope that we can set up a system that can lead the way for other cities in the mainland. But we have achieved success in the past, and probably because we are densely populated and we have 90% of passengers using public transport service, and this may be our edge. For example, the TIH Transport Interchange Hub. This is very much needed in Hong Kong because we are a small city and a very crowded city with lots of commuters traveling at the same time. So we need to make sure our transport system is seamless, smooth, and efficient. We hope this can be the focus of our strategy study, and if we become successful, I believe many cities will be happy to exchange experience with us. Smart motorway is of course another important topic. It is not easy to develop another major trunk road for Tai Po Road Shatin section. We strived really hard to operate another lane after removing the cycle track. So building more lanes is not an option. We must explore smart motorway management. Say, in terms of design of our motorways, can we be more forward-looking so that we have resilience to future issues and keep ourselves flexible? I think comparing to many other cities in the mainland or cities around the world, we can take the lead because we do have the practical need in light of our small size. And as for KPI, I'm sorry, but we are really running late. Please, maybe you can answer the question when the next member asks the same question. Next, Mr. Chan Siu-hong. Thank you, Chairman. In light of social and economic developments and the need for providing efficient and reliable public transport service to the public, I think it is of paramount importance that we devise the TTSS and also come up with a transport strategy blueprint. But I hope that the government can consult stakeholders, including the Legislative Council, at each step along the way, and not only at the end of the study. And I support the setting up of a dedicated team to take forward this important TTSS. I have a number of questions. First, in the budget, the Financial Secretary announced a number of measures. For example, the civil service establishment will remain frozen in size in the coming year. Although we're talking about a supernumerary post, not a permanent post, according to Annex 3, there are 8 D2 directorate posts in the Transport Department, including assistant commissioners and a safety officer. And I understand that one of the assistant commissioners' tasks is to draw up public transport strategies, including taking forward the TTSS. Well, of course, the TTSS is one of the major strategic studies. So my question is, why do we need a supernumerary post to take forward the TTSS instead of putting it under the safety director and the assistant commissioner in Annex 3? And according to the alternatives considered, the incumbent assistant commissioners already have a lot on their plate. So I want to know, after creating this post, how do you avoid duplication of duties, and how do you make sure that you have proper coordination and division work to ensure that there won't be a waste of manpower? Ms. Law? Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chan, for the questions. Of course, we need to be careful in our manpower planning, and we should avoid creating posts as far as possible. For the 9-member dedicated TTSS team, 8 of them will come from internal redeployment. In relation to our proposal today, as well as the work that we have been carrying out since last year, including the issuance of 10 tender documents. This comes under the work of the Assistant Commissioner, and that is Mr. Leung Sai-ho. He also undertakes a number of major initiatives, such as the railway strategy beyond 2030 and a major railway development strategy, and we're required to submit the report within 27 months, and this comes under his portfolio. We have other major transport infrastructure planning, such as Route 11 and also Central Kowloon Route. These are all tasks undertaken by this Assistant Commissioner. So he has a lot on his plate. But I fully agree with Mr. Chan that we should continue to liaise with the Legislative Council and other stakeholders. We should keep you informed of our progress, and we should continue to seek your views so as to continue to improve our work. If we step up liaison, and if we are to do so more frequently, experience tells me that we need the assistance of this supernumerary post of Assistant Commissioner. Thank you. Chairman, it's not coming through. Right. Next, Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. For many years, Chairman and myself have been urging the administration to conduct a traffic and transport strategy study. Basically, it's done once in a decade, but it's been 20 years since the last one. Now, the next TTS will be conducted, and I support the TTSS. I have a question about this establishment proposal. The chief executive mentioned in the policy address that meritocracy should be the basic principle for recruiting directorate posts. This is a supernumerary post for a period of 4 years. My question is, why must it be an engineer? Because according to your strategic directions, one of the criteria is to be people-centric. So why is it limited to an engineer? Why can't you conduct open recruitment on the basis of meritocracy? And about traffic and transport strategy study, TTS, has to be conducted. I hope that this will be done more frequently, not like a previous study which was conducted in 20 years ago. It was conducted in we're now in 2020, and although you have regular reviews, you should conduct a study more frequently, especially for the territory-wide travel characteristics survey is conducted only once every 10 years. I don't think you will be able to catch up. And if you don't have accurate data and updated data, your policy will be lagging behind as well. So you should take note of the change in the commuting patterns. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your questions. Why do we need an engineer? Well, there is a practical need. First, the Assistant Commissioner should have an understanding of the engineering profession, and this post should be respected by the engineering team. Now, for the TTSS, we propose to incorporate the concepts and objectives in the development of NDAs in terms of reserving capacity or introducing concepts such as separation between pedestrians and vehicles and more bicycle-friendly measures to achieve carbon neutrality. These are issues on which there should be exchange of views between the department and the works department, because our concepts and strategies may affect the planning of the works teams. Allow me to interject. Why is it that the planning work is undertaken by engineers, not planners? They take a more comprehensive view, don't they? Well, I haven't finished. We need to work with our consultants as well in terms of feasibility. We need to seek advice from our consultants. Perhaps Mr. Yao can also supplement. He is an engineer. Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your comments. The TTSS seems to be focused on transport infrastructure, and this is exactly right. The reason why we need an engineer. The government engineer taking up the supernumerary post in a dedicated team will need to work with different professions, planners, architects, so on and so forth. He will be coordinating different professional teams in taking forward the study on a number of areas, such as planning, as mentioned by Mr. Chair, and that is why we need the coordination work undertaken by the Assistant Commissioner. Well, I think Mr. Chair's point is that you have a traffic engineering department, so it's called the government engineer. But Mr. Chair's point is that if we adopt the principle of meritocracy, even a planner can take up this position as a government engineer in taking forward planning. Please consider his comment. Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chairman. The TTSS is a long-awaited study. It's very much needed in Hong Kong. With increase in workload, we need to create a post. Now, I don't have any comment. However, I'm concerned about the deliverables. And you talked about this being visionary and forward-looking, and I really have a lot of hopes in your study. Now, for the 4 key directions set out in the paper, when we're talking about green commuting, autonomous driving, these are hot topics. But I don't think these are forward-looking enough. you need to make sure that it is forward-looking, because when it comes to technological advancements, there may be drastic changes in a decade, let alone all the way to 2050. A lot of tech products will have been developed. So in terms of vision, I see that there is a lot of emphasis on road transport. It is inevitable. I'm not objecting to it. But when it comes to autonomous driving, we should be mindful about using airspace as well. Usually, when it comes to airspace, we talk about long-haul trips across boundaries, and drones or autonomous flights can actually carry passengers or at least carry goods. So it's a matter of logistics. In developing the NDAs, you should consider limiting the use of road space and reducing congestion.
Secondly, how to make use of the fourth dimension. If you talk about road surface, I think every day, 2/3 of the time will be that road surface is fully utilized. I think we should consider the use during non-peak hours so as to increase transport capacity in the whole city. So in the TTSS, I hope that there will be some breakthrough on this point. Instead of just following traditional approaches based on the original study or past trends. So if this position can be created, I hope that there will be value for money and there would be good utilization of the position holder, because these are trends that will definitely be seen in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Lam, for your support. I agree strongly with you. It is true that technology advances very fast. The travel characteristics survey is done once every 10 years. At any point in time when we see a new trend, we will do small-scale study. For example, last year in October to December, when the pandemic stabilized, we studied travel characteristics. Of course, that was a smaller scale study. And thank you, Mr. Lam, for talking about the use of road surface and other transport resources during non-peak hours and four-dimensional uses. These are important, and it is something we will look at. We don't need to wait till 2025 before we can come up with some options to increase road surface use during non-peak hours. Thank you for the reminder. Commissioner, Mr. Lam raised a very good direction, and that is the low altitude flying, the use of drone. How can it be used for passenger and also last mile delivery of cargoes? I think his points should be also included in your study this time. Next, Mr. Yu. Thank you, Chairman. On the TTSS proposed by the government, well, I agree to the direction. This is a very important study, and I think it is reasonable to create a new position. In the future, regarding the quality and use of this study, I think there's the need for KPIs. Mr. Lam Siu-lo made some suggestions. I agree with him. I think we need to think more about the marine routes. So land transport and low altitude transport and marine transport, I think these should all be taken into consideration in future transport development. I agree to smart development and smart mobility development. So these can meet residents' needs, and in the TTSS, we need to also include tourists in the study. So in the future, well, Hong Kong can continue the development as an international tourist destination. For green mass carrier model in the future, this will be looked into, and the use of bicycles and electric devices can be considered in order to alleviate needs for private vehicles. I think during the pandemic, many beautiful scenic hiking trails and destinations, rural islands are discovered, and these are important tourist resources. So in future developments of transport strategy, I think the government can think of rural areas and restricted zone and provide green transport so that tourists and residents' visits to these places can be enhanced. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Yu. Green traveling or green tourism is important. This is some important point in tourism development. In Hong Kong and also globally, everybody is looking for new things. Of course, for the TTSS, it must be considered in a comprehensive way. In the coming few years, when tourists come back, we need to do more in terms of green transport. Thank you, Mr. Yu, for suggesting to us marine route or marine transport. And then concerning airspace use, raised by Mr. Lam, I did not respond too much. It is not that I don't want it, because when it comes to airspace or aviation, it is not the work of transport departments alone, but we will consider its development. The same goes with marine transport. Any follow-up, Mr. Yu? I can't hear you. Yes, Chairman. Nothing more to add. In terms of policies, I hope that while the study is being done, there can be implementation at the same time. We should not always be catching up. We don't need to wait till the whole report is done in 2025 before we implement things. Otherwise, we always have to catch up. That's all from me. Thank you. Thank you. Next, Mr. Lee Sai-wing. Thank you, Chairman. So we want to relay people's opinions in LegCo, and we have to make sure that public funds are well spent. In the past, when the government did studies and consultancy studies, a lot were done and a lot of money was spent as well. This time, the department said that TTSS is to be done. Well, how can the department convince members that if new positions are created, is it really necessary, and how can we make sure that public funds are well spent? Number two, sometimes transport department carries out some studies, but the most important thing is implementation and coordination. In implementation, there will not be only the transport department, but other engineering departments. So how can there be good coordination and implementation of various measures? Number three, it is always easy to say and preach something. So in Hong Kong, there are a lot of things to improve in relation to traffic. So many people and members are of the view that there are a lot of outstanding things that are not done completely yet. And now you are talking about new ideas. So, for example, we want to promote electric vehicles, and that there should be more supporting measures and facilities. Many members of the public would like to support environmental protection and advocate EVs. However, EVs and supporting measures are still very backward. So how can we catch up? In the past, I always said that there is traffic jam on many roads. In Chang Kwan O Tunnel, well, I think the tunnel tariff should be abolished so as to alleviate congestion. But then these have not been done yet. So how can the department convince LegCo members? Commissioner, thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I believe Hong Kong needs a more comprehensive, large-scale traffic strategy or transport strategy study. I believe members are in agreement, but then members just want us to make sure that money is well spent. Of course, it is also our concern as well. I think the member's point is right. Coordination is important. Transport department is not the only player here. And as members said, we should not wait for the pie to be fully made. We need to make sure that things are done at the same time. We can refer to a number of examples. Taxis, for example, they are important in our TTSS. So we want to make sure that there is good complementarity among different modes of transport. And if you talk about Central Waters reclamation and the Hong Shui-Kiu Railway development, when we know our actual arrangement, then when we plan together with other departments, we should incorporate our concepts in the plan. Then we can see the benefits earlier. And there can be better coordination among different players, instead of having to strive for land and other resources in the project. So Mr. Lee also mentioned EVs. We will not wait till 2025 when the TTSS is completed. We should do the work now. We have to go in line with the EPD's policy. So we have done a lot about private vehicles, but we also need to think of commercial vehicles. When the carbon neutrality roadmap is already issued, this point becomes important. So today, we are also working on public modes of transport, especially public buses, because public bus companies have more resources. So we are working on electric buses and hydrogen buses. For minibuses and taxis, we are working with EPD in pilot scheme related to the use of electricity and hydrogen energy. So we'll see whether we are able to achieve carbon neutrality in transport. We don't need to wait till 2025 when the blueprint is ready. We can start the work earlier. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. This meeting should be adjourned at 12:45, but now there are 3 more members who would like to speak. So I will exercise my right to extend this meeting by a maximum of 15 minutes. Next, Mr. Chen Hang Bun. Thank you, Chairman. So the TTSS is to be done. In this council, in the past years, we have been striving for that study for a long time. So we support this study. And I think it is reasonable to create a new position because the TTSS involves heavy workload and it is going to be a lengthy project. So I think the departments can think of what type of persons will be most appropriate for the position. For the study, I hope, well, in the past, this council has raised a number of recommendations. And last year, I talked about reshaping capacity of transport. And points are made about interchange. We made visits to different places to look at the arrangement. Well, if you wait till the TTSS is completed to do the work, then perhaps we may not be able to cope with changes in the population. In the Northern Metropolis, there will be gradually population intake. And if you only introduce measures when this TTSS is completed, then we may not be able to meet the needs in time. So do we introduce measures after the study is completed, or can we introduce measures now? Next year, we will resume Western Cross-Harbour Tunnel, and in the coming 2 years, Tai Lam Tunnel will also be resumed. Then all the tunnels will belong to the government. Some time ago, I suggested a charging system based on electronic charging system, but now for the tunnels, well, the government has not asked the operators to install automatic charging. And so if the system is installed after the tunnels are resumed, then that will take some time. Actually, you can put in place some basic measures now. And so you can see immediate effects and benefits. So can things be advanced? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me first respond to Mr. Chan's first question, and then I'll defer to Mr. Yao to respond to his first point. Mr. Chan is very familiar with transport issues. He understands that we'll be taking back the tunnels soon, and I think that there is expectation among the public that we need to rationalize, say, tunnel tolls and other arrangements. And for decades, I must say, we have not had a major change in this regard. We will come up with amendments, but it will take time to implement the proposals. And definitely, we will make use of all the opportunities, such as the West Harbour Crossing and Tai Lam Tunnel. And in fact, in the end of this year, there will be free flow tunnel toll arrangement for a number of tunnels, and I'm grateful to the Western Harbour Crossing for allowing us to install hardware early. By the time we take back the Western Harbour Crossing, we'll be able to allow auto toll arrangement. If we work on the hardware early in terms of collecting tolls and installation of software, we will make everything ready. And very soon we will come back to the council and discuss further issues with the council. Right, Mr. Chan talked about reshaping capacity. Now, this is the focus of the TTSS. For example, in terms of traffic infrastructure demand, the traditional idea is to build more roads, but at the same time, we need to reshape capacity. That is, we should optimize the use of road space for maximizing efficiency. The transport interchange hubs is one direction. We need to start at an early stage. For example, we need to coordinate with the works department in charge of the Northern Metropolis and the artificial islands in the central waters. And this is exactly my work. I take a team and have meetings with them. And in the early stage of their design, we want to make sure that coordination is put in place. As for pilot schemes, must we wait until 2025? Now, the approach is that we implement pilots as long as the proposal is feasible, and then we gauge public opinion and make certain adjustments before rolling out the scheme more comprehensively. So by then, you will be able to check out our pilots. Next, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. I support the proposed TTSS, and this is in fact the fourth comprehensive transport studies in Hong Kong, and it has come by a bit late. After I joined the council in 2014 representing the engineering sector, on numerous occasions I had urged the administration to conduct the fourth CTS. The previous three studies were very crucial in improving the livelihood of the people. The first study was conducted in 1976, which mainly encompassed a study on the MTR, and the second CTS was carried out in 1980s for the purpose of the Cenral Airport and other trunk roads. And then the government conducted the third CTS, which laid down Hong Kong's transport strategy in different directions, with the focus on railways as the backbone of the passenger transport system and more environmentally friendly transport measures. I have been questioning the government for not conducting the fourth CTS, so I share the chairman's views. Now the government has shown commitment in taking forward this study, and the government has proposed to create one supernumerary post of government engineer to take forward the study. I support that, and there are 4 points we should note in this study. First, there should be coordination on the overall the use of planning of land, and that we need to start early when land planning is involved, such as studies relating to the artificial islands and central waters. A second point is a change in the commuting patterns. For example, with an aging population, and elderly commuters' needs may be very different. The third point is environmental protection, and there should be green transport. Of course, this is the focus. The fourth point is that we should place focus on innovation technology, how it drives the change in our transportation modes. For example, autonomous driving technology is being developed, and some cities have introduced autonomous taxis, and this will have a significant impact on the structure and the network of our transport system. So you need to incorporate these 4 points in your study. Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman. I've heard you loud and clear. That is why we are here after another meeting in October last year. It's not just about creating a post. We need members' input and advice on improving the study. Any follow-up? No. I hope that this study will be carried out as quickly as possible. I'm the last one to speak, and I thank the administration for telling us what the third CTS was about. And as mentioned by Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, after we joined the council in 2012, we repeatedly urged the government to conduct the fourth CTS. Now the fourth CTS is titled Transport Strategy, Traffic and Transport Strategy Study, or TTSS. It's all right to have a new title, but it's long overdue. And I understand from the administration's presentation, and I'm happy to hear that you'll be widely adopting technology and you'll be placing focus on connectivity with the Greater Bay Area. In fact, in the third CTS, I questioned why the government didn't consider connectivity with the mainland, because we didn't expect a surge in the mainland arrivals and tourists. And there were bottlenecks in our transport system. Regarding the vision and the video clip you've prepared, I really appreciate that. I hope that in near future, Hong Kong will become another showcase success of a public transport system around the world. And you talked about infrastructure and use of technology. And I want to remind the Commissioner that we have repeatedly told the administration we think that there is imbalance in the public transport system. Apart from the MTR, all public transport service operators are struggling, such as ferry services. Without government subsidy, they can hardly survive. For let alone the public light buses and other operators, they are really in dire straits. Should their services be kept, I hope that in your study you will look into the balance of the ecosystem of the transport sector and how we help the other operators to be sustainable. Thank you, Chairman. Different public transport modes have different positionings. Of course, railway is a backbone of our public transport system. But apart from that, we have different services for the public. We have taxis, buses, light buses, ferries serving the majority of Hong Kong people. And there are different commuters requiring different forms of transport. Some elderly passengers may not want to climb stairs. They may rely more on road transport. So in terms of different modes of transport, we need to find out whether they have a unique positioning so that they can survive in a complementary manner. They should not be competitors. They should not seek to drive out other operators. And this is the objective of the TTSS. We want to find out the positionings of different service providers so that they all have a room for survival in the future. Basically, I haven't heard any members objecting to the proposal. Some members ask whether it's value for money, whether it's really necessary to create a new post, or can we rely on redeployment of existing resources. So I need to ask members here once again whether you support the proposal for a supernumerary post to be created and that the establishment proposal should be submitted to the establishment subcommittee. Let's have a show of hands. Those in favor? I see that including myself and the majority of members present are in support of the proposal. Any objection? Any abstention? No. So thank you, members. Would the administration please submit this proposal to the establishment subcommittee for further discussion? So that's the end of item 4 today. Item 5, any other business? I have nothing under AOB, so that's the end of today's meeting. Thank you for attending.